This is the Last Minute Blues Podcast with Alex Ferrario, Donnie Fandango, Jeremy Rutherford, and Jeff Burton on 101 ESPN.
The Last Minute Blues Podcast is presented by Blue Note Roofing. Roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofing.com for a free inspection.
It is the Last Minute Blues Podcast, which is brought to you by Blue Note Roofing, roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. Welcome to the Jeff Burton Studios for the Last Minute Blues Podcast. And listen here, guys. I know that as my time as a sports fan, I have tried to get better. You know, like at balance, at like long-term vision, at like, hey, it's only been 5 or 6 games.
You doing yoga right now, Donnie?
Actually, yes.
There we go.
But
Downward Dog Donnie. That's what his new nickname is on the show.
I should not be so annoyed after this Blues Kings game last night. And I know they got a point, so that's good. But gosh dang it, guys. I'm not quite sure what we're watching here after 6 games, if I can be honest with you. There have been some nice highs. Hello, the Dallas game. There have been some miserable lows. Hello, the Blackhawks game. And I just kind of am not sure where we're at here. I just firmly still believe that even if this is not like a top 5 team in the NHL, that we should be seeing more consistency out of these guys so far, and it's just friggin' frustrating. I am very frustrated this morning, and I do believe, though, it's probably more frustrated than I should be, if we can be honest.
That's what these leather chairs are for. It's that therapy session. We come. Donnie's not pulling any punches. He just comes right. He's like, "Look, Doc, we need to talk. I'm getting really frustrated with what's going on around here."
And I know the answer to this, Donnie, is when some people's frustration level starts off at a 1 or a 2. You know, after 6 games, it might be a 4. Yours starts at a 7. So
Yes. I do start a little hotter. That's for sure. But I think you guys would agree with me, man. Like, you see things, that Saturday night game against Dallas, man. I was just like, here we go, the boys. And then last night I'm watching this and they're not generating second chances. It doesn't seem like there's like a real
or first chances.
You're right, man. And like, it just seemed like we kind of know who the guys are every game that are going to try to bring the team into the fight, and Shen and Walker. And like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know, a little disheartened. I know there's a lot more left here, and, we don't need to bottom things out, but I'm just frustrated today.
Yeah, and I mean, it's understandably so, and I get where people are frustrated, because how this team left you feeling, you went into the season thinking, like, this is going to be a good year. When you win 12 in a row and get to Game 7, you're thinking this is going to be a good year. So the questions and the concerns right now is, where is this inconsistency coming from? And JR, I think you nailed it in your article, talking about like what Jim Montgomery said after that Kings loss tells you the story, that they're still in this weird rut of some nights they show up, some nights they don't show up, and trying to solve the problem that I feel like we've talked about for the last 3 or 4 seasons. Why can't the team start on time? Because when you look around the NHL, the teams that are always at the top, from the moment that puck drops, you know what you're getting out of them. Like Vegas. I was watching Vegas the other night. They're one of the few teams that are still undefeated in regulation. And the moment that puck dropped, it's Vegas hockey. It's fast, down your throat offensive zone time. It's when you get into their own end. Defensively, they're going to shut you down. They've got big bodies. Colorado, you know exactly what you're going to see every single night. So that's the part that I can understand where the frustration's coming from. Part of me wants to say it's 6 games into the season, and it does take some time to get your footings right in terms of new faces and chemistry and what you're working for. But then there's also just the quote-unquote effort side of it that Jim Montgomery has talked about. And that's the part that I'm always like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah, and I think when we sit here and ask ourselves the question, is it too early to be frustrated or worried, we should just point to the coach last night showed his frustration.
Yeah.
And listen, if he comes out, he decides that he's going to say those things, then he's already been thinking about that for, a week, 2 weeks behind the scenes. And now he comes out and says it. So that's the thing is, like, I don't think anybody expects the Blues to be 6-0 sitting here, but they also don't expect to win 2 games in Western Canada, show up the next day at practice and say, we've got to come back and play a good game at home after what happened opening night against the Minnesota Wild, and then proceed to lay an 8-3 egg to the Chicago Blackhawks, or go play your best game of the year against the Dallas Stars. And then last night you got a team that's lost 4 in a row, that's playing with a goalie who's been out for a week and a half, and get 8 shots on goal in the first 2 periods. So I think that's what led Jim Montgomery to show his frustration last night and say we're right back to where we were last January, where we didn't have the accountability and they had to earn it. But guys, here's what we need to focus on. Last January, you look at the standings, you know where you are. You know what you need to do. You know when you come back from 4 Nations, it's either this or we're out of the playoffs.
Yep, backs against the wall.
And also, so guys are in it together. Guys, let's get this done. What Jim Montgomery said last night, he's talking about guys being on their own agenda in terms of, I'm looking so that I get off to a great start. You have guys who could be in the Olympics. You have guys who are up for contracts. A lot of these top guys for the Blues aren't producing right now. I think Jim Montgomery wanted that to be known, and I'm sure it's something that he said to the players last night, and then it went down into the media room where he said it to us.
Well, also keep in the back of your mind what he said a few days ago also, of how he was asked about Kyrou and Thomas, and he said, we need them to produce. We need them to be our leaders. He's talked multiple times already in the early portion of the season of we look to our leaders to establish that culture, that core value. And, I think when people hear that, they're like, oh, okay, so you're talking about the captains and the guys that wear the letters. Well, I mean, you look at how Braden Shen has performed early in the season. I mean, he's done everything he can to draw the team into a battle type of atmosphere. Prior to that game against the Kings, Justin Falk was playing top ice time for the Blues, and he and Broberg were one of 3 pairs that did not allow an even strength goal to the opposition through 5 games. So, okay, well, there's another letter. So it's not just the guys that wear the letters. I think he's talking about your top players dragging you into the fight, playing to a certain style. And it's been a trend that I think he's talked about probably 4 of the 6 games that they've played so far this season.
All right. So, JR, I want to know, can you kind of tell us a couple of the things that stuck out that were very direct with what Coach Montgomery said after the game last night? I think, one of the things was, that the sort of the chemistry, the whatever that you built last year is gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. You got to start all over again. So that was one thing. Also, too, when you see anytime a coach say what he said last night about players playing for their own stats and not the team, that is a big swing that you don't say unless you are for real meaning it. So how do you not burn out the team by saying that this early in the season? Also, the team knows that that's the coach. The coach ain't going anywhere. So it just seems like it was very startling for me to read some of those things that Coach Montgomery said yesterday or last night after the game. Not because I don't agree with them, but just because
you're hearing it 6 games into the season.
Into the year, and that's maybe why I'm a little more agitated today. I don't know.
No, I think one of the biggest things, the obvious, right? The things that you said, those are the obvious things that stuck out. But I think the one thing that caught my attention was when it was asked, I think Matt DeFrank's Post-Dispatch asked him, how did you get out of that last January and get to a point where you were producing? And he said when guys stopped thinking about what their role should be or what it has been in the past, and they just accepted the role that was right there in front of them. And I think he's saying that can be applied now. Hey, whatever your role was in the past or whatever you think it should be, let's put that aside and let's play how the team needs you to play. That was his answer to how they can move forward, and I think that was pretty telling.
This was a line that Doug Armstrong told us at the beginning of the season, just kind of the narrative for the team this year. He said the lone wolf starves while the pack eats. And he's like, that's going to have to be their mindset if they have success this year. And that goes to what Jim Montgomery's talking about. You've got individuals who are focused on their own numbers of, well, I haven't scored yet, or I haven't lived up to the expectations of what the team or the NHL views of me, to where now you're pressing. And, Jim Montgomery, not in a negative way, but he's talked about Dylan Holloway, where he's just pressing a little bit. He's trying a little too hard. He's thinking. And Joey talked about this on pregame with me a couple of nights ago. He's like, when you're thinking in hockey, it's over, because the team is the league is too fast. The league is too good. The more you think, the less success you're going to have on the ice. And some of this was last year when the team was rolling. There was no thinking. It was just line after line after line, playing a certain style, and the bounces were going their way. I'm not saying they're getting unlucky in games right now. They're just not going into the battles. That was the one thing that Monty said after the Kings game was, I think he was asked, what do you need to see so you see that the team's starting to do that? He said one-on-one battles that they're winning.
He named everything.
Yeah, he did list off every single thing.
If it was a competitive area of the game, he named it.
Basically everything other than jumping over the boards you needed to do. But board battles, one-on-one battles, going in off the rush, like everything that Jim Montgomery was, there's no battle in the team. And that, I wonder, and I can ask you both this, are they still searching for that culture that we've talked about in the past?
Yeah, it just seems like it was there last year, but I guess I don't want to say that.
But shouldn't culture carry over from one season to the other?
Especially if a majority of the team is coming back, for the love of Pete.
You would think that it would. And look, I think those players in that locker room truly believe that they have a good chemistry, a good camaraderie, a good culture in that locker room. I think they would disagree with what Jim Montgomery said about the accountability. But obviously, he's the coach. He sees the work habits. He sees that they're not getting,
right.
They're not practicing well after a big win like the Dallas win the other night. So, I go back to Ken Hitchcock saying it is tough to recreate year after year, because you got to come in and establish it, and guys have to be receptive to their roles, like we just talked about. But I think that in order for everybody to perform the way that Jim Montgomery is hoping for them to, the top players have to produce, because then the players under them can kind of slide in. Okay, we're getting the scoring from here. I can come in and deliver this. And when you're not getting that from those top guys, then I think it's tough. And while we're on that topic, you mentioned Holloway's name. I just wanted to say that, Jim Montgomery did have some comments about him. He said that, he said he's thinking too much. I know that I got this question last night after the game, so I want to make sure we're all clear about this. Did Dylan Holloway not look like an all-star, like in training camp?
Oh, yeah.
He looked unbelievable.
He was called by Doug Armstrong the hardest worker on the team.
Yeah, and so some people are saying, hey, where's this Dylan Holloway that was midseason form? Were you guys exaggerating how good he looked in training camp? No, he looked that good. So now we're into the regular season, talking about pressing. He's talking about, he's thinking too much. And, all I can do is repeat what Jim Montgomery said yesterday, is that, hey, sometimes with a serious injury, even though you look healthy and you're playing healthy, it takes some time to recover from that. Whether, he's got the torn oblique, he's overcompensating in other areas of his body, and that can have an effect on you. And Jim Montgomery mentioned it takes sometimes months for those players to get back. So that really doesn't add up when you see the Dylan Holloway we saw in training camp. But I guess you just have to look at it. You guys tell me, that's training camp. This is regular season. It's different.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Don.
Well, no, what I was going to say, man, I don't want to bag on Holloway too much, because I feel as though that, and you guys tell me that I'm wrong, but I feel like the guy's been working. I feel like he's just has not gotten a lucky bounce to go his way, or to get that goal that can kind of let him friggin' chill out a little bit. I don't feel. Am I wrong?
Well, no, the one game he had the big goal and they had the big hit right after it. So I think that's a moment where he's stuck.
And he looks like the same player on the ice. It's not like he looks like he's favoring, like he's not skating as hard. He's throwing his body around. He looks still like he's the fastest guy out there. It does feel like frustration is building up because he can't find the back of the net. Now, he scored the one goal and you were thinking, all right, that might break the mold. But then you also have to look at, well, they've also been juggling these lines nonstop.
Right.
It started with Holloway, Shen, and Kyrou. Then it was Holloway, Suter, and Kyrou. Then it was Holloway up with Thomas and Buchnevich. Then it was Holloway up with Thomas and Neighbors. Like, they've been juggling these lines around, and the two guys that have remained steadfast, no matter where they've played, that have looked consistent, have been Jake Neighbors and Jordan Kyrou. And then I guess I should throw Pius Suter in there, because Suter has looked pretty similar to wherever he's played. So, I mean, like, you've seen 4 different line combinations trying to get that Thomas line working. And, you know, I go back to the Dallas game to where afterwards Jim Montgomery said, I liked the Suter and the Shen line, which, you know, process of elimination. He's still trying to find that chemistry for the Robert Thomas line. I'd say that the 2 biggest ones to me, just from body language and how it looks like they're playing, that look like they're pressing, are Buchnevich and Thomas. They're just 2 guys that look like they're trying to find the back of the net, and the more that they don't, the more frustration that's building up.
All right, guys, if we can, I would like to take a real quick break here, and then I actually want to specifically talk about those 2 guys, and Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich. More of the Last Minute Blues podcast coming next. One of the notes, guys, that I wrote during the game last night, and I hated writing this. I don't like even saying this. I have been a gigantic Pavel Buchnevich fan since he's been here. But the thing that I wrote last night during the 3rd period of the game is Buch, one of the best players on enough nights to warrant that contract. Again, man, like, I love what he brings to the table. I think he's funny. Like, I feel as though he's probably a good teammate, but and I was telling Alex this before we started recording, JR, like, I feel like there are just way too many nights where I don't hear Buch's name. And like, for a guy that you have on the number 1 line that you just gave a big deal to, I don't know, man. And I know that he's a hot and cold guy too. Mm-hmm. So I know that that's kind of part of Buch, but I just feel like we're getting way more cold than we are with hot or even warm, for the love of Pete.
No, I agree with you. And you guys know it. I mean, I picked him as our bounce back player. You know, he was mine, a guy who's going to bounce back. He's starting out on the wing. He's playing on the top line with Thomas and at the time Snuggerud. And here's a guy who's going to figure it out and get back on track, especially with the new contract. But I think you're right. And I'm going to be honest with you. I have a tough time coming up with a good answer when people say, what's wrong with Pavel Buchnevich? Like, sometimes you can say, hey, why is this guy not playing well? Well, XYZ, that's why he's not playing well. But with Pavel Buchnevich, you know, I'd love to hear a coach's honest answer, because what I see is a guy who has the skill to score goals, has the skill, he's a disher, he can make passes, he can create. He also can, you know, protect the puck. He's also a little bit feisty when he wants to be. Like, he's got all the assets that make him into that guy, but I don't know that it's all being applied, you know, during the course of a game. And I know I keep falling back on this stock answer. You know, I hate to keep repeating it, but I just feel like he's not noticeable. And sure,
I don't think that's a stock answer, dude. Yeah. That's what absolutely.
So the Dallas game, he's right in front of the net, and, you know, he plays a role in Jimmy Snuggerud getting that goal, whether it's, you know, whiffing or whether it's getting the puck to, you know, so he's been involved in some scoring plays this year. He's got an assist, I think, in
4 of the 6 games, I believe.
4 of the 6 games. You know, you can go back and look at the highlights to see, you know, how the assists impacted the play. But all I'm saying is 4 assists. But he's a guy, to me, at the end of the night, this year, last year, I don't know that I watched him. Like, and that's all I can say. And so why is that? You know, what would Jim Montgomery tell us as to why, you know, he's not making the type of impact that he could? I don't know. Maybe that's something we can talk to him about when we get down to practice.
Yeah, like the why is a hard part, because I'm not in Pavel Buchnevich's brain. Like, what I can go off of is when I've seen Pavel Buchnevich at his best, whether it was that first season he was with the Blues when he scored 30 goals, or even most recently, go back to that game against, I believe it was game 3 against Winnipeg in the playoffs, where he had the hat trick. He was the most difficult player to play against every time he stepped over the boards. And what Jim Montgomery always talks about is predictability. When Pavel Buchnevich is at his best, he's predictable. And puck is going north. He's winning board battles. He's making space out on the ice. In these last few games, it just feels like he's always a step behind the play, trying to keep up with it, some of the passes. And that's the part that it's like, man, I just wonder if it's pressing to where it's like, I need to get a goal. Because it's not so much of their individual stats as I wonder of, well, this team's losing and I've got to start scoring, so I've got to get one right now. And Pavel Buchnevich, he's got 4 assists, but he's still looking for that first goal. So the why is such a hard part for me. But to your question, Donnie, that's the part that I think the Blues are struggling with right now, because they went into the season with a top line that was clear cut. Buchnevich, Thomas, Snuggerud. We think these guys are our top players. And then Holloway and Kyrou can create mismatches on the ice. But man, if Pavel Buchnevich is juggled between lines already, that's telling you that he's not playing to that top line wing caliber player. So I don't know if this is him pressing. I don't know if this is just the chemistry's not right. I know for a fact in the past, he's talked about how he and Thomas work so well together because they like to play below the goal line. They like to cycle the puck. They like to try and get into those weeds in the offensive zone. It just doesn't feel like you're seeing that same style that makes Pavel Buchnevich what Pavel Buchnevich is.
They can like playing together all they want, and they can like that style together, but it's not.
If it's not successful, then what are you going to do?
And I totally in agreement with your point about pressing, but that means he's been pressing for a year and 6 games. It's so... Yeah, he just has to go out and play the game. And maybe that's, I think the coaches have said in the past too, also with Buchnevich, like you did with Holloway, not so much thinking, just go out and play. Just go out and play.
Yeah.
There was a point last year that I was at a Blues game and I ran into someone someone that I know that I would says has a very high hockey IQ. And if I told
Chris
you
Pronger.
this person was, you would agree with me.
Alex Ferrario.
At this particular time, the person was incredibly upset at Robert Thomas because of the perception of his body language on the ice. Not only when he would make a mistake or miss a shot, but if a teammate would. I think this person felt as though that Robert Thomas from time to time could maybe be demonstrative with his body language with his teammates. I love Bobby Thomas, but man, I kind of feel sometimes there's the same bit that I talk about with Booch where I don't feel like I see Thomas out there being the Blues' best player every night as much as he should be. And then also, too, guys, is this body language thing, is that a real thing? Like, was this person completely pulling it out of their ass? Or is this something that Robert Thomas does? Because I feel like in watching the game last night, there was a particular time where he did like sort of the head up in the air, the arms out sort of thing. And like, bro, that's not helpful. Yeah. So I'm just curious.
I think, you're right. It is a storyline. I will say that the situation last night, if we're talking about the same thing, is when they felt like the puck went out, it hit something that it should have been a face-off in the O-zone.
Yes.
Instead, they pulled it out.
You're right.
So you're right. And I guess any player in that situation is probably going to get frustrated. It's not like missing a shot, but no, you're right that is a storyline, and I think they've addressed it with Thomas in the past. And I'll say this too: the other day there was a practice where
I was going to reference.
Yeah, Jim Montgomery blew the whistle, and he said, "Whoa, everybody get over here!" And so we could hear him, and he said, "Listen, we're not going to get frustrated after something goes wrong every time." And he says that affects your next play speed. If you're, curling and throwing arms up, and some people call them banner readers. Yep. You're like reading the, Chris Pronger is retired number 44 up there.
I'll be up there soon.
You're looking up there, then you're not getting back in the play, and you're not getting the puck back 3 seconds later, which is what Jim Montgomery wants. So that's why I thought it was interesting last night when Robert Thomas, in his answer about what the Blues need to do, he said, and we need to keep our emotions in check. So I thought if he's having some growth in that area,
Which you hope is the truth. Because last season it was a big storyline. Last season it felt like for a couple of months it was, man, Robert Thomas just always looks frustrated on the ice because things aren't working out, whether it's with his line or something else. This one... that I was going to reference Jim Montgomery stopping practice because Curbs talked about it on the broadcast the other night. And it's like, okay, so that tells you that it's happening. And it's not so much the next play as it's getting off the ice and getting the next shift on there and how that circulates through the rest of the bench. Like the positive example I can go off is Jordan Kyrou against Dallas. Like when you're back checking and making plays like that, that's got to lift everybody's spirits where it's like, oh, okay, if Kyra's going to do this, we're going to go out there and do this. So the same can be said if you see that negative body language after a play that doesn't work out. And they happen at times, whether a goalie makes a big save or a play just doesn't work out like you think it's going to. That's where it just feels like the play is slow. And, in the second period against the Kings, you went 15 minutes and 51 seconds without a shot on goal. So to go that long, it's like, okay, well, the play's slower here. Now, I give credit to what the Kings did because they played a very tight brand of hockey, but like you ask the question, how do you go that long without a shot? And it's just the play isn't living up to the speed that the team has. So I don't know if that's the body language from individual players or it's just the trickle-down effect from one guy to the next line, and it just stops that momentum that you're hoping to build.
I want to make this more than it is, because I do that. But like, to me, that's not a particularly sign of a great captain or a great assistant or whatever.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I understand being frustrated, and you have every right to be frustrated, but like, if your actions are viewed as demonstrative by your teammates, man, like, that ain't helpful, like, at all. So yeah. This to me seems like a maturity thing that's still going on with Robert Thomas. And to me, as much as I, again, love him and respect him, it feels like maybe we should be here by now.
Yeah. Well, and it feels like that's why
this should not be a thing that we're still talking about at this point in his career.
And I think that's why Jim Montgomery had his press conference the way that he did after the Kings game, because obviously he's seeing things that are happening that it's like, okay, this has to get nipped in the bud now. We can't wait until January to start getting things right. We've got to do this now. And if you look at the trends, you lose the home opener. You have to go out there and you play better hockey on the road. You get a goalie stealing the game in Calgary. You play really well in Vancouver. And then you practice, day off, lose the game to the Blackhawks. After the Blackhawks game, you practice, you come back and you play against the Dallas Stars and you have a really strong performance. And then you get the day off, the practice, Jim Montgomery goes on. So like, you're seeing a trend right now. And I think that's the maturity that he's talking about. They're trying to stop that 6 games in rather than 36 games.
Yeah.
in.
And I think your point is valid. And I think that it is an issue. It was a, storyline last year. I got a ton of respect for Robert Thomas, and he's an elite player. Like, he can be the face of the franchise type player. I don't know if he realizes how much of an impact that bad body language or signaling of frustration can have on the entire team. And I'm sure he's been told that, but, maybe it's habit, maybe it's a hard habit to break. If he produces and he's putting up, a point a game,
nobody's talking about it.
It's probably not a big issue.
Right.
So I think that's probably why we're talking about. Yeah. So I know it's been addressed, and let's see where it goes from here.
All right. So we got just an absolute flood of emails after the last podcast.
No.
And I want to get to those in a second. But before we get there, I wanted to specifically ask about this. I understand inevitably that your top two pairs of defensemen are by and large going to get more minutes than that third pairing. That third pairing is the third pairing for a reason. Mm-hmm. All right. I get that. All right. But I'm a little curious as to why the Blues trust their third pairings as much as they have so far. I understand when you have Mailloux in there, who's brand new, but it just seems as though even with Tucker, there's just not a whole lot of trust in Kessel, in Tucker, obviously, in Mailloux. But you can't keep running your top 4 20 plus 21, 22, 23 minutes a game. You risk getting one of those guys hurt. Guys, what the heck's going on here? Don't we legitimately have to figure out a way for this bottom pairing of defensemen to at least help take some of these minutes off the top 4? Am I crazy in saying that and thinking that?
I mean, I don't remember what the final numbers were in that game versus the Kings, but I know against the Stars, Cam Fowler played 27 minutes. And I believe they said on the broadcast that's the most minutes he's played, or that's the most minutes he played all of last year with the Blues. So like it's uncharted territory, at least recently, for Cam Fowler. And I mean, Parayko's a guy that always eats 26 plus minutes a night. Broberg's up there, Falk's up there. What I've noticed in these last couple of games is they're not playing Tucker and Kessel together. They're mixing and matching. So it's certain guys are double shifting to where, one shift Tucker's out there with Parayko and Kessel's out there with Fowler. And then the next shift, it's Kessel's out there with Broberg and then Tucker's out there with Falk. And then you may get a shift with Tucker and Kessel together. So that's where you're seeing that excelled ice time for those top players, because they're not putting Tucker and Kessel out there. I don't know how long you could get away with just playing those guys 9 or 10 minutes a night, especially once you get deeper into the weeds of the season. When you're 20, 30 games in, you hope that they progress and they continue to grow by that point to where you put a little bit more faith in. But this was the part that I think a lot of people were concerned about when they made the trade for Mailloux. Man, you've got 3 guys now that have played fewer than 75 games in the National Hockey League. And there's no safety net that Ryan Suter was last year, because Ryan Suter was a third pair guy for you. And before all of the injuries, Leddy was playing on a third pair for you. So you had guys that you could play closer to 18 minutes and feel comfortable with. But now you've got 4 guys that you play significant minutes, and those next 2 by the third period, if it's a tight game, you just don't see them that much.
Yeah, you nailed it. And I looked at the average ice time for the top 4 after 6 games, and Parayko's, let's see here, Falk is leading 23, Parayko's right there, 23. Then you got Fowler's at 22 and Broberg's at 21. And that's pretty high, for those guys, especially when you're talking about earlier in the season. Remember when that's why Doug Armstrong said he had to go out and get a Cam Fowler because he was playing the top dogs too much. Yeah. And Alex, you nailed it. They're just working those guys in there. And, you would think that a Tucker you can get 12, 13 minutes out of and feel comfortable, but he's past 2 games, he's less than 10. Like you said, they're kind of weaving him in and out. And I don't think that's going to work. Like, you want your defensive pairs, the top 4, those guys, to stay together and build that continuity and be able to execute. And then you got to be able to count on that third pair. And so that's why, even if this Mailloux trade works out, and in 2 years we're talking about what a great player he was, this is like a homework project now. Like, this is how do we get through with this third defensive pair? Who do we have to put with them so that we're not worried about them? How can we give them more minutes? First, we got to trust them chicken, egg. Like, there's a lot going on there defensively. And I think if you're putting together a list of the Blues' top 2 or 3 issues right now, after you talk about that production of those top guys, you got to talk about that third pair defense.
Well, and just to add on to that, I mean, you're talking about that, but then the other thing that you're seeing a lot of is you're seeing multiple players only play on the forward side, play 9-10 minutes. So they're shortening the bench, which isn't uncommon. They've done this before, to where they'll go down like 2.5 lines that they just roll through.
But even this early in the season?
That's the part that...
Okay.
Well, with Sundqvist
if I would have let you finish, that's what you would have said.
No, but with Sundqvist out, because that's...
Toropchenko out, with Texier, like,
you just
literally, he played only like 7 more minutes than I did last night. Like,
JR was playing hard.
Well, and on top of that, there's just no identity. Like,
that's my thought. You're struggling right now from an identity line.
Yeah, you got no identity. Yeah. Like you write down the names Texier, Bukestad, and Walker, but that line is a fraction of what the Blues are used to getting from the fourth line.
And watch these games, because after every goal that is scored, whether it's goal for or goal against for the Blues, Jim Montgomery goes out there with Bukestad, Walker, and Texier. So he's trying to use that line as an identity line. But now you're talking about, by the third period, 1/3 of that identity line isn't playing. So now you're double shifting a guy, whether it's Suter or Joseph on that fourth line. So now your identity line is taxing on another player, which is going to impact another line. So they're really struggling from having that line that was the go-to line. One of the biggest reasons they went on that run last year was because Faksa, Toropchenko, and Walker were consistent every shift that they played.
Best line.
And by the end of the game, in the third period of a 1-goal game, you still saw that line out there on the ice.
Yep.
That is the difference from where they were last year and where they're at now. They need a line that can draw everyone else into the fight, that gives everyone else a breather. They just don't have that. Now, hopefully they'll have that when Sundqvist comes back, when Toropchenko comes back, and then you've got decisions to make. Bukestad maybe moves up to a third line, create a little bit more offense, and now you've got a Sundqvist, Toropchenko, Walker line. But I think on top of not having another defenseman that can eat 18 minutes a night that you can trust, you don't have a fourth line that you can use right now.
This podcast is making me crappy. We've got some really great
Let's
emails.
rip through them. Yeah.
We're going to finish up the Last Minute Blues podcast. Coming next, hang out. All right, first of all, we just want to thank everybody. After the episode last week, I was just getting mountains of these emails.
Donnie
and so I messaged the guys, like, Holy crap. And like, these are good questions. Like, so genuinely appreciate everybody emailing in lmbp@1057thepoint.com. Here's the one thing though I do want to say going forward is that if we keep getting this amount of emails, we're going to have to put it on you guys to be short and sweet and to the point. Like, because in order for us to get to a bunch of these, we got to keep them kind
of concise. Saying these are way too long this week.
Donnie's like, I can't read these.
No, I'm not. But I'm saying if we get very many more than these,
good luck.
I don't know how we would fit it in with the rest of our bananas. All right. So we've got Julie messaging in. Julie says, am I the only person who was just exhausted hearing that we should have never gotten rid of Bolduc and the constant updating of Bolduc scoring? Geez, people, let it go. Let's focus on and appreciate the current players on our roster. I love the podcast, 10 out of 10. Now, Julie, what you're doing here as a sports fan is using common sense. And that's a real tricky game. But yeah, I completely agree. And also, too, those of you that are out there that are going to do this with Mailloux, you're going to be putting yourself through it for another year or so because it's going to take this guy a year
Blues
or
fans
two.
Hope that it's only a year.
Yeah, for real. Absolutely hope it's only a year.
I can think of one other person, Julie, that's probably fatigued with that, and it's probably Logan Mailloux.
Oh, God.
I'll give you this is a broadcaster insight because, luckily I get to sit up top and watch the game, and, next to us is where the Doug Armstrong and the coaches sit. So the game against Dallas, that first healthy scratch for Logan Mailloux, he's up in the press box, he's watching the game, he's sitting next to Robert Bortuzzo for most of the night, which pretty good person to sit next to watch how you're supposed to play defense. And while I'm in the middle of one of my intermissions, Al McInnes just comes in and he sits down right next to Logan Mailloux. And I mean, they are just talking through the entire first period together. And internally, I'm thinking, man, how cool is it if you're Logan Mailloux to be sitting in a game, probably feeling down in the dumps because you're a healthy scratch, and then you're sitting next to a Stanley Cup champion and Robert Bortuzzo, watching the game, getting tips, and then in the first intermission, a freaking Hall of Famer walks in and he sits down and he just lets you pick his brain and talks with you. So I can understand the concern because Bolduc, which by the way, I think Bolduc's cooled down a little bit, so maybe that'll cool down some of the people that are concerned. But man, like, this is what they wanted, right? Like, Mailloux gets scratched to watch the game from up top and realize, hey, I got an extra 5 seconds before I rush this play. Or, hey, maybe I don't need to chip in on this one. And then you get a Hall of Famer and Al McInnes telling you areas that you can improve on. So this is the whole point of sitting up top, watching up top. Bolduc's talked about it when he was with the Blues. Thomas did it as well. So I thought that was pretty cool to see with me.
I wish we would have had that story when we filmed that commercial about why you listen to this podcast, because that is just some great stuff.
It's called.
I mean, yeah, that's gold, and fans should be excited about that. Whether you like the trade, don't like the trade, you think the Blues are not going to win the Cup this year because Bolduc's not on the team. To hear the instruction that Mailloux's getting, it's just phenomenal.
Dude, I can't even imagine that. And also, too, just as you, seriously, for just a second, the young Alex Ferrario wanted to do this, your job is now in the room next to those guys. That's pretty badass, Alex Ferrario.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I'm not in the press box.
Yeah.
Because I can't handle that professionally.
Will you sign this?
Yeah, believe me. It's just like, don't look over at him. Don't look over at him. Don't make eye contact. Don't let him do the thing.
All right, Marciano emails in with this one. And this is a great question that I wish I would have asked on the last podcast.
Hold on. You pronounced it wrong, buddy. It's Marciano, huh? There we go.
Way better. I lean into you for that one, Alex. We placed Colton Ellis on waivers, and as we know by now, he was picked up by the Sabres. Why would Doug Armstrong say he was surprised he was picked up? And if he is good and possibly in our future, why was he even on waivers to begin with? Thank you very much. I'd like to ask both of those questions.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, a player's contract, his age, when he signed the contract, how many years he has in, decides whether he needs waivers or not. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it all added up to he needed waivers. When Doug Armstrong said that he was surprised, I think because Colton Ellis is a good American Hockey League goalie right now, but when a team picks you up, they have to put you on the NHL team. So the Buffalo Sabres can't pick him up and stash him in the minor leagues, and all of a sudden they've basically got what the Blues just had, a good American Hockey League goalie. So, Buffalo had some injuries with their starter. They had some goalie issues, so they picked him up and they brought him in, and basically Doug was saying, I'm surprised because when this guy gets put into a game, that's going to be his first action, and is he quite ready? Maybe not. He still needs some more seasoning. So, he was legitimate Blues number 3. Yeah. Like if there's an injury to Hofer, it was Ellis coming up. But these are the rules. There's a thing called waivers. It's in the players' benefit because then teams could just keep sending you down to the minors and you never get your chance in the NHL.
So who's our number 3 now?
Yeah, so
I would say it's Zarenko, who was kind of the number 2 in Springfield last year. They have that Will Cranley, who they liked in prospect
camp. Then they signed the guy.
Yeah, they signed a guy out of, so he was playing in the San Jose organization, and he was playing over in Russia as well. He's a young goaltender, and I think he's like 6'6", so he's a big dude. And I think he played in his first game last week, if I'm not mistaken, for Springfield.
Yeah, I think it's a body, what is he, mid-20s, 25, experience. He's played, Will Cranley just not there yet in terms of a guy who you can count on in Springfield. So, I think it was a big loss for the organization. A really good question there. It's just that these are things that the Blues have to do to make the roster.
And why he was placed on waivers in the first place, if they liked him, is because you can't carry 3. Well, you can carry 3 goalies, but if you're carrying 3 goalies,
it's at the expense
somebody else is going. And think of the roster crunch we talked about a couple of weeks ago of what they were going to do. You can't afford to carry another goaltender and never play him.
And if Buffalo didn't have an injury, then perhaps he gets through and you're not even talking about this. It's just the risk that you have.
And I think one thing that we should keep in mind, in which when we get frustrated and get ticked off.
All right, Donnie's telling you, everybody, listen up.
We are not the Buffalo Sabres. So
you don't want to be Buffalo right now?
Man. Listen, I got my extra grind with both teams in Buffalo right now.
Oh, I forgot about that.
But that whole situation just seems so hopeless. Hopeless. So I am just genuinely grateful. I'd rather have the problems in which that we have.
I like how Alex basically just said, "Oh, I forgot you're a Buffalo Bills fan, Donnie." Like, I don't know my anniversary, but I know that Donnie's a Bills fan.
Dude,
play it for the audience.
Listen, I just need both of my teams playing well at the same time. I don't know what I'd do with
the Sabres and Bills. That's what you're talking about.
We got a message here from Beck. Beck says, "Hey guys, just wanted to check in after the Blackhawks game on the 15th.
2 turntables and a microphone."
Dude, interviewed him 3 times. One of not even in question the most awkward interview I have ever had each time. And it's not because he's like a dick or anything. He's not. He's just art brain, man. He is just art brain. And when you're asking him like just a regular question, I don't think that he really understands how to make that happen.
That's how I describe JR, art brain.
Oh, but so good live. Anyway, Beck says, let's see, talking about Chicago, honestly, the game felt like a wash. Nobody played well. Nothing really clicked, which happens. I do have a question about Logan Mailloux. I think we kind of answered this a bit, and how the Blues plan to develop him. If you're the coaching staff or management, how do you actually develop him to play at the NHL level? Is it mostly film, separate from the team, letting him play, make mistakes, learn on the fly, or something else entirely? I can actually answer this right now. It's a combination of all of those things.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. It's a combination of all of those things.
So it's all of them. And Alex gave a great answer to a lot of this earlier. But the only question I have is, when is the right time to put him back in there? And, if you're trying to grow with these young players, how many mistakes can you put up with where you say, okay, yeah, he made a mistake. We lost the game last night, but he's getting better and we need to keep him in there. I think that's the challenge that the Blues are going to have.
This is the hardest thing to navigate right now because you can't, look at how they're acting after a overtime loss to the Kings. You can't afford to have mistakes on the ice, but you have to have mistakes on the ice so that you can improve.
He's only going to get better if he plays.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so this next one, I'm just going to kind of, Isaac wrote in a really great email about, obviously you see defensive pairings where guys have great chemistry and forward pairings where guys have really great chemistry. And his question goes, I was thinking the other day about chemistry between defensemen and forwards. Have you ever heard of players discuss anything like this? Or have you noticed watching games that certain defensemen and forwards play well together? I feel like Fowler and Kyrou play well off each other. Parayko, Tomic, Buchnevich also seem to have a lot of chemistry. Sorry if this is a dumb question. Absolutely love the podcast. Keep up the amazing work. Isaac, I'm the only one that does dumb questions on this podcast, and that was not a dumb question at all.
That's one I've never even thought to ask. But I can't imagine it would be chemistry built with defensemen other than on the power play, right? That would be the one that I think players have chemistry with a defenseman like Torrey Krug in Boston for the longest time. You just knew it was going to be Pasternak and Marchand and Patrice Bergeron on the ice, and they were going to come up with something magical. But at 5-on-5, I mean, they just rotate through them so much that it's hard to imagine that they'd have chemistry on the ice with certain defensemen.
So just to be clear, the question was in reference to defensemen having chemistry with the forwards.
Yes.
And he brings up the point that, on the power play, you see that. 5-on-5, I agree with Alex. It'd be pretty tough to kind of pick up on something like that. I would think that just because the top lines are usually out there with the top defensive pairs in a lot of cases, that they've just played so much together. Have I heard players talk about it? Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you hear them in the locker room. I've been playing with Parayko's Beast. Sometimes the
nicknames are hard.
The nickname. I've been playing with Beast for so many years. I know where he's going to put the puck, and that would be pretty interesting if you got down to the nitty gritty on okay, if Thomas says Parayko always does this when he's coming up ice. And maybe here's a story here.
I smell an athletic.
So Isaac, not only was it a good question, but maybe there's an article coming.
Donnie's got something to not read in a couple of weeks.
Corey messages in, hey guys, love the show. I watch every episode. How important is it to get 3 wins in a row early in the season? I feel like the streak is what lets Blues fans and players know that they can get on a roll. They didn't get it against Chicago, but you hope they put themselves in a position to try again soon. Thanks, boys. Let's go Blues. I mean, if anything else, it's just consistency, I think, in the win streak is what I would love to see, but it does seem like it's difficult to get 3 in a row.
Evidently, it's not important because they didn't do it last year until they won 12 in a row, and then you sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah. So maybe they're just saving it up.
Yeah. Well, God, please don't save it up for the last month of the season.
We don't need that.
I don't need that anxiety like we had last year.
I think it's important, but coaches will tell you this too. It's not so much 3 W's next to your schedule in a row.
It's 3 consistent games.
3 consistent, play consistent. If you lose 2-1 last night, but it's a hard forechecking, winning puck battle game, then Jim Montgomery's not making those comments post game. But that's not what it's been on the nights that the Blues have looked bad.
That was always a Hitch comment. You can lose games that you were supposed to win and win games that you were supposed to lose. And it's like, it just depends on how you play. So I don't think it's 3 wins that matter. I think it's 3 60-minute games that matter.
All right, a couple more here. Hey guys, what do you feel like is the realistic ceiling for Hollywood Holloway? Can he break out all the way as a top-line superstar within a few years, eclipsing Kyrou as the top winger on the team? Is it more likely he'll remain a top 6? Love the show. Haven't missed an episode since I started listening. That's from Jason D. Donnie, we love when you get mad about hockey. Get mad. It's amusing. Well,
get mad, Donnie.
Hang on, because throughout the season, I'm sure there will be plenty.
Just rewind it.
5 people that listen to every show. This is pretty amazing.
Hey, 6. My mom listens.
We appreciate it.
My mom listens. I've said it before. I think he's got top line superstar potential. I guess the real question is, how do you label a star in the league? Is it a 40-goal scorer? Is it a 90-point player? I just think the way that Holloway plays, he's a guy that looks like he consistently could score 30+ goals.
Yeah, and I agree. When I say this, I don't want to take anything away from Dylan Holloway. I think he can be and will be probably a great player in this league, but his traits are the dogged tenacity. I might score on this shift, but the next shift, I'm going to hit you into section, 220. And I think for players like that, there probably isn't the potential to be a 45, 50 goal scorer where when ESPN or TNT puts the game on, it's Dylan Holloway versus, Connor McDavid. I don't think he's that type of player, but you don't need to be. And I want a player like him because he's even more valuable, maybe not more valuable than McDavid, but more valuable than a lot of your quote unquote stars. Yeah. So I think, if you're going to put a goal ceiling on him or something like that, is it 35? Yeah. Is it 65 points or 70 points? Yeah, it could be, but I'll take the way he plays and what he brings to the ice and what he brings to your team any day.
I agree with that.
I love this next email. As a matter of fact, Dylan was so emphatic. 6 minutes after he sent the first email, he sent a second. So, Dylan.
You get the timestamp.
Dude, it's amazing.
Donnie's like, this is amazing.
He says, gentlemen, I wish to bring forth the discussion of one Tyler Tucker. I love this guy. Holy ish. He is a big guy throwing his body around, but that's not it. He's reliable on both sides and so ungodly underrated offensively and in caps, and no one is talking about it. He's got 3 points so far, and as he gets more comfortable, he'll be amazing. Love Mr. Tucker to death. He's got some good nicknames. Big Country is amazing. Tux is all right, but I propose Speedball Tucker as a reference to the song and the late great Jim Croce. Love the podcast. Love all yous. Yes, even you, JR. Have a fantastic day. The Tyler Tucker fan page, Dylan. Now, hold on. That's number one. And again, okay, I'm sorry, 16 minutes later.
Okay.
Get it right, Tyler.
Not to mention, this man is a 7th round, 200th pick, and he's not a key piece of this Blues blue line. Like the most resilient and inspiring story on this team. It's insane how, in caps, no one talks about him extensively.
You think he's a Tyler Tucker fan?
Yeah. Could you imagine you send the first one and you go back and you're eating your golden? Oh, I forgot.
I got one more. Dudes, I kind of want to join in on this a little bit with Dylan in the fact that, man, in the playoffs last year, Coach Montgomery was talking about how much he loved Tyler Tucker. And so, for me to see him getting just 9 or 10 minutes a game, it does not make sense to me. And I'm not saying he's perfect. And I know that he's in that grouping of young Blues defensemen who are still learning, but am I crazy? Is Dylan crazy?
No.
Talk about this.
I think Tyler Tucker is the prototypical third pair defenseman, and that's not a negative sentence to say. He is a guy that is physical. He can play sound defensively for you, and he could play 14 minutes a night, and you don't even really notice him on the ice, other than if he drops the gloves like he did last night. Like he's that physical presence that Robert Bortuzzo was for the longest time. So Tyler Tucker, he's got a ceiling of an every night but third pair defenseman that can provide offense. He puts pucks on net. The reason why, and this goes back to the earlier conversation, we saw so much of Tucker and consistency from Tucker last year because he was playing with Ryan Suter. You could throw Tucker out there 18 minutes a night because Ryan Suter's out there with him.
Point, yeah.
And Tucker talked about this with Joey. Joey mentioned it on the broadcast. Tucker said, man, Suter was 40 years old, and he was like, hey, knock that ish off. We're doing it this way. Put the puck north. I need to get off the ice and then go back on. Like Suter was that parent to a toddler that said, don't put your finger on that. Don't put your finger on that. And then when they stick it in, I told you not to put your finger on that. So, I do think part of the reason you're seeing Tucker inconsistently is he's also playing with guys that are rookies. He's also playing with inexperienced players. He's not out there with Letty or Suter. He's out there with guys that both are trying to understand how to play at this level 18 minutes a night.
And, Donnie, I think I've said this before, Alex, I think they beat Winnipeg if Tyler Tucker's on the ice.
I agree.
Killing off the 6-on-5.
I agree. That doesn't make you feel bad at all, right?
I don't know. It just
I'm going to go out on a limb, too. If they had Holloway, they probably would have won that series in 7.
Well, then Winnipeg says Garrity, and you can go on and on about, if who has who, right?
No, I said it, JR. If they have Holloway and Tucker, they win in 7. Why are you doing that to me?
I only got one beef with the email.
Okay.
This happened in the TMA show. They said, nobody ever talks about it. I just wrote about it. Nobody ever talks about this. I've read
do an article in the Athletic about him, yes.
Tyler Tucker, we talked about him a few times. He's a good player who does a lot for this team. And not a huge part, but I think that he's a guy who really fits in well with what the Blues are trying to do, and he plays his role very, very well. So, but okay, we will talk more Tyler Tucker.
I'm sick. You know what I'm sick of? Nobody ever talks about Jordan Binnington.
Right.
Dude, that was a really great article about Benner. And I'm not just saying that. What kind of guy is he? He just seems like he is like the cool older brother that you wish you had. You know what I mean? Like kind of quiet, doesn't need to say a whole lot because he's just really, a badass and knows it.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you one little detail from doing the interview with him for that article a couple days ago is, you walk in there, right, Alex? The media do all the time, and you don't know what they remember and anything. And so I walked up to Jordan Binnington. He's taking his skates off. You always wait till they get the skates off because the equipment guys are waiting for him. And when he finished, I said, hey, you owe me. And he said, owe me for what? What do I owe you for? I said, I haven't interviewed you all preseason and the first 5 games of the year, so I'm using my time now to get 8 or 10 minutes to write a story about you. He goes, I talked to you for that story that you did about what we're wearing to the rink now. So you've already done an interview. I'm like, how do you remember that?
He called you. I like that.
Yeah, it's like, shouldn't you be thinking about a technique that you're doing in the crease instead of, who you've interviewed with who. And so anyway, he was great. And to open up, talking about, being a dad and what that's meant to him and how he hits the reset button after games. And, how many people would meet Adam Sandler and, you'd be giddy because of who he is. And Jordan Binnington says, what I'm impressed by is the fact that he's such a great family guy in addition to being a superstar.
That's awesome.
So it's those are the fun pieces.
It to me seems like your goaltender has to be like Jordan Binnington, who is just cool, calm, and collected, unless he's going after Nazem Kadri.
Understandable.
Or he is like Mach 10 with his nuts on fire, like Patrick Waugh. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't seem like there is any like sort of middle ground there. Like it's one or the other.
Nuts on fire.
But you know what I'm saying? I feel like
I don't know if I've ever been Mach 10 nuts on fire.
Maybe this is a good time to wrap up the Last Minute Blues podcast.
JR, that's the next follow-up with Binnington. Be like, hey, have you ever been Mach 10? Have you ever felt this? Watch his reaction. Be like, what?
I don't have any more interview time.
Yeah, no, you wasted it all 6 games in.
Well, gentlemen, I feel like we've accomplished a lot.
We went through 10 emails today?
We went through a lot. LMBP at 1057thepoint.com. Always a shout out to our fantastic sponsor, Blue Note Roofing, roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofingSTL.com for a free inspection. We are live in the Jeff Burton studios for our homeboy, Jeremy Rutherford from The Athletic, Alex Ferrario from 101 ESPN. I'm Donnie Fandango. Thank you as always for listening and for watching. And most importantly, let's go Blues.
The Last Minute Blues podcast on 101 ESPN
is presented by Blue Note Roofing, roofing, siding, and gutters. Your St. Louis roofing experts. Visit BlueNoteRoofing.com for a free inspection.